I bet you didn't know that the hemorrhoidal cockroach Skip Bayless was in on the Herschel Walker trade. He had inside information. He was almost even consulted by the Dallas Cowboys before they made that famous blockbuster 1989 trade. Of course, the reason you didn't know that is because it's not true. Mike Fisher reporting from Frisco at the Star, Cowboys headquarters, where I don't spend a lot of time anymore on the issue of Skip Bayless. I've tried to steer you right here because I've known Skip for 30 years, and I've known him at what for a moment was his best, a brief moment, and I've known him for Skip Bayless at his worst, which is pretty much now all the time, since he sold his journalistic soul many, many years ago in order to turn a buck. He used to turn a phrase. Now he just turns a buck. And if he has to backstab you on the way to doing so, he will do it. And if he has to make up stories on the way to doing so, he will do it. I have illustrated to you before, and I'm going to take a minute to do it again because I do think it's helpful, especially when people ask me, Fish, you're really hard on Skip. He can't be that bad, can he? He's not that bad a guy. Yeah, he really is. He really is that bad a guy. You probably all know the Troy Aikman story, where Skip wrote a book, sold a book to a publisher, largely based on the concept that he was going to expose the quarterback of America's team and that quarterback's sexuality. Didn't matter that none of it was true, it just mattered that it was salacious. Didn't matter that Skip couldn't prove it, it just mattered that somebody might buy it. And as I've told you here before, I'm going to tell it again, because I think it's important. Skip will tell you that he had a source. And I know who the source was. The source was Barry Switzer's teenage daughter, who Skip first went to and said, have you heard this rumor? And she said, no. I'm a 17-year-old girl from Oklahoma. What do I know? And then Skip turned back around to Barry Switzer's offspring months later and said, have you heard the rumor? And this time, Barry Switzer's offspring, no fault of this person's, no fault of the Switzer family, said, yeah, I have heard that. Well, where they heard it was from Skip. So yeah, they heard it. It was out there because of Skip. It's a rumor that Skip started, that Skip perpetuated, and that Skip then used as sourced material for a decrepit book, an almost evil book. But he made money, and he's still making money. He's done this to every single person that I know that he's come in contact with. He's crossed them for money. He did it to football players. He destroyed Alexander Wright, pretended that he was basically a preacher when Alexander Wright needed a father confessor. And Alexander Wright told him his deepest, darkest secret, that he had been abused by his father, not knowing, not only not intending that it not be in print, not knowing that Skip was even a writer. He thought he was talking to a priest. Seriously, that's what a con man Skip Bayless was in the Alexander Wright incident. And Alexander Wright the next morning wakes up and he looks at this newsletter, this fax thing, and Skip's written all these details that Alexander Wright had essentially never told anybody. But he told this jackass. Time and time again, I can give you example after example after example. And I'm not talking about where Skip is wrong. I'm not talking about where he says Larry Bird will never be a good player or something. That we all make those dumb mistakes. I'm talking about devilish behavior. Stabbing people in the back, stabbing people in the front. When, after the Cowboys won their Super Bowl, publishers were looking for books. And one of them went to Skip. Skip wrote a book about Jimmy Johnson's Cowboys. And incredibly, and we'll get to Jimmy Johnson in a minute, incredibly, very few people in this building, actually that building, Valley Ranch, very few people allowed themselves to be interviewed by Skip for that book because a couple of years in, they had learned what he is, who he is. Don't cooperate with him. It's not going to do you any good. It's going to hurt you because he'll hurt you for money. Jimmy Johnson refused to be interviewed by Skip for a book that Skip was writing about Jimmy Johnson. That tells you all you need to know. There was 2 other books that came out. This is Jimmy's. Turning the thing around. This is the other that came out, Stars and Strife by Mike Fisher. The Dallas Morning News did an interview with Jimmy and did an interview with all of us, all the authors, all the guys who were writing books. Actually, the Jimmy interview came later. I'll get to that in a minute. And in the Dallas Morning News story, Skip claims that all the other book writers stole their information and stole their idea from him. He didn't have any information. And the idea of writing a book about a team that wins the Super Bowl is not exactly original. It's true that Skip may have been the first one to get the publisher phone call because Skip had already written a book, highly successful book, trashing Tom Landry for money. So Skip's publisher probably came to him even before Jimmy's publisher came to him. But that doesn't mean that Jimmy stole Skip's idea of writing a book. That's preposterous. Skip also told the Dallas Morning News writer, who happily was smart enough to not put this in the story, that my book, this one, still available, by the way. It's probably out there. You can probably get it for $3 now. But if you contact me, I probably have 5 of them in the garage. Maybe I'll slip them to you. Skip told the Dallas Morning News that my book was very pro-Jerry, which I don't know. I think if you read it, you'll find it's pro everybody. They'd won a Super Bowl. It's even pro Jimmy, and Jimmy and I are not besties. Skip told the Morning News that the reason that my book was pro Jerry, and this is true, Jerry Jones wrote the foreword for my book. So I'm not saying that I didn't then or don't now have a relationship with Jerry Jones. I do. We also wrote another book, coffee table book, about that same time. That foreword was written by Troy Aikman. And so yeah, I'm a little bit pro the people that are nice to me, especially when a Super Bowl. So Jimmy tells the Morning News the reason Fisher is pro Jerry in the book is because Jerry bought him a car. That Jerry bought me a car. Now this was 1991, 92. This was news to my mom, who just passed away, by the way. Thank you for all the. I mentioned this before, and so many of you have sent me heartfelt notes. I appreciate that. In 1991, 92, I was driving my mom's Volkswagen Jetta that I had purchased from her because I had moved from San Francisco. She was in Colorado. I moved from San Francisco, came down here, needed a car. I bought her car. I don't know how much it had to be. I don't know, $2,000. I paid my mom for it. She probably gave me a good deal on it, but it was an old Volkswagen Jetta. So thanks, Jerry, for buying me a car. That was my mom's. That was 8 years old. That was worth $2,000. Thanks, Jerry. Really appreciate that. Again, luckily, the Morning News didn't put that in the story. Skip tried to ruin me, tried to ruin other people who were writing books because it wasn't enough. It wasn't okay that other people were writing books. Skip has to destroy you if you're in his way. And this week on his Fox program, what got in Skip's way is the truth. Somehow the subject, I think they were talking about trading Dak to the Jets, something that we'll talk about here eventually. By the way, we'll talk about it like intelligently and factually. Not going to make it up without having spoken to anybody. And then Skip somehow brings up, or the other guy, Shannon Sharp, brings up, can you believe that blockbuster trade in 1989? And Skip says, believe it? Well, I'll tell you something. Jimmy came to me before the trade. Skip essentially suggests that Jimmy consulted with Skip Bayless about trading Herschel Walker. He said, would you believe it if I told you I could get a king's ransom for Herschel Walker? I'm going to get it. And Skip says, this is on a Saturday. They traded him on the Monday. Skip didn't know there was a trade going on Saturday. Otherwise, it would have been in the newspaper. But everywhere. And it wasn't. Jimmy didn't go to Skip Bayless. Jimmy didn't even speak to Skip Bayless on a regular basis for any reason, including when Skip asked him, would you please let me interview for my book? Jimmy said yes to my book and was very generous and gracious, even though we're not besties, because he trusted me, because he knew I was going to handle myself like a professional and not backstab everybody and not make stuff up. Skip's on national TV making it sound like the Herschel Walker trade, like he was kind of involved in it. And in fact, he said to Shannon Sharpe, he said, oh yeah, I was right in the middle of it. In the middle of it? You're a columnist for a newspaper. I don't have anything to do with it. Thankfully, thank God, Jimmy Johnson saw it on Twitter, saw somebody comment on this on Twitter and said, that's not true. That story's not true. Making it clear, I didn't talk about trades with Skip Bayless. I didn't talk about anything with Skip Bayless. Skip Bayless got to sit in the press room, in the press conference with everybody else and go sit in the fifth row and eat his curds and whey. That's what Skip Bayless got to do. He had no involvement with the trade. He had obviously, he had no real involvement with the Cowboys. He has no real knowledge of Jimmy Johnson's Cowboys, no real knowledge of Jerry Jones's Cowboys, not after they realized what makes Skip tick. I am in this library. I don't know if I can show you this. I'm going to try. This is the media library at the Star. And as you can see, yeah, you'll be able to see this. It's magnificent. Okay? And as you can see, it's lined with souvenirs, trophies, great old photos. Did I mention trophies? And books. Lots of books. All the books. I didn't take 20 minutes to look. There's a lot of books in here. I took a minute to look. I found this right away. I found this right away. Can't find Skip's. Maybe the PR department has it stashed in here somewhere and I just can't find it. Or maybe somebody realized if you pick up Skip's book, it's icky and gooey and oozy and gross, just like its author. Fish out.